Welcome everyone to Black Knowledge Matters. And before we start, I want to acknowledge a dear friend that has joined us. I haven't seen her in a while. We've been talking together on Facebook, and she is I think she is the very first person that joined Wose Community Church, our sister, Roberta Murdoch. I'm glad you could join us, Roberta. Thank you for coming. Yeah, you see Katabasi there, and there's Nabantu, some of the people that were there back in the day. So Chester Higgins is a photographer extraordinaire. I'm reading from, I think it's a website. It says, wrestling with issues of memory, place, and identity. I see my life as a narrative and my photography as its expression. My art gives visual voice to my personal and collective memories. It is inside ordinary moments where I find windows into larger meaning. Light, perspective, and the points in time are the pivotal elements I use to reveal an inner presence with my subjects as I search for what I identify as the signature of the spirit. And we're going to ask Chester Higgins to explain that a little as we go on. And he's an alumni of Tuskegee University, class of 1970, and he's a professional photographer, author, public speaker. He was a staff photographer for the New York Times between 1975 and 2014. Exclusive gallery representation, Bruce Silverstein's Gallery, 529 West 20th Street, New York City. And there's a website associated with that. He has numerous publications and articles. But again, one of the ones that we're going to really talk about this evening is the Sacred Nile. Everybody help me welcome Chester Higgins. Thank you for coming today, brother.
Thank you. What a blessing to be here with you.
Yes, indeed.
Giving honor to the Creator, amen. Actually, the Egyptians felt that the Creator was not a man. I can explain it to you. The Egyptians felt that the Creator was a woman, and the woman of the universe, her name is Nut, pronounced NWT. The English, in their great confusion of languages, spell it NUT, and the French come closest with NUIT, which is night. So the Egyptians, we are the seeds of our ancestors, the ancient Egyptian people, just like the thought that we we worship in religion is also the seeds of those same ancestors. Believed in nature. They're probably the closest thing we can identify with is Buddhists. And in their mind, there was a balance in nature. And the woman had equal divinity to the man. But the woman was the creator. She was she gave birth to creation. She existed in their mind, cosmologically, and they left behind these drawings that you can see of Nut. And the drawing looks like this. Imagine you're looking at the planet from outer space. Hovering over the planet from one side to the other, over the solar poles, not the magnetic poles. The solar poles mean the one where the sun rises and sets, is a long black body of a lean woman. This is the woman they call Nut. And she's very important because Nut exists in the night sky, and her feet are placed on the eastern part of the horizon, and her arms are on the west. And this is very significant because when the tired sun goes down in the west, it then climbs up her arms like a runway, an airplane flying in a runway, to enter her body where it is recharged overnight. The dress she wears has holes in it. So you see the light glimmering out of Nut inside the belly, the body of Nut, which we call stars. And in the morning, after 12 hours of recharging itself, the sun, the mighty sun, is ready to be born again. And that's why her feet are on the eastern horizon. That's when she gives birth to the sun. And the magic then comes out to be the magic of Amen. Is the thing that tears away the night and let the sun come through. And the sun is the one that activates all existence. So the Egyptians will go to the church, to the temple, farming people. They will go to the temple an hour and a half before sunrise to start their worship, praying for the next day, praying for Nut, praying for continuity. So when Nut arrives, at the sun rises, and that's when they finish and they go to work. They leave temple, they go to work. Now, they take Nut a little further. Nut is so important in the minds of our ancient fathers and mothers, that not only was Nut the daily thing that you prayed to because she was going to give you the sun, but if you ever go to a museum and you see an Egyptian mummy case, if it's open, you're going to see things in the bottom of the mummy case, very beautiful stuff. What people don't look at is and the lid is very beautiful. It's the person who's supposedly in there. What people don't look at is what's underneath the lid. What's underneath the lid is an outstretched woman, Nut, welcoming the deceased back home. So imagine it. Here you are, a mummy. The lid comes down on you, and who is there to give you comfort? Who is there to receive you? It's Nut. So Nut is creation. Nut is the universe. Now, when the that's a lovely and very apropos treatment of the woman. It's totally different when the patriarchs got to it. And they did a whole nother thing. They were completely against women. That's why they made war on the woman. The woman became what? All original sin is wrapped up in this girl, and the man gets away like a rapist. Only because she wants knowledge from the apple that the energy of the universe and the snake is telling her to pursue. What kind of God is this? But that's, but this God does a lot of strange things as we go along. But what the thing here is that the world before Genesis had a balance. It acknowledged the balance between everything, night and day. Nut, the woman and the women power, male power. You, the man, you are half your mother. The woman, you are half your father. And not only that, Nut in the universe does something that we have in the sky. We have two eyes. Astrologically, we have two eyes. There are two eyes in our sky. One eye is the sun, and the other eye is the moon. Those openings in the curtains of the sky, those are the two eyes. Now, Nut's eye regulates our time. So we can tell our months, we can tell our seasons. But Nut is the only one, her light is the only one that connects the night and day. You cannot have the sun shining at night. It will always be day. But Nut can shine at night. And because she connects those days, that's part of her power, part of her understanding what she's all about. So I have to give it to the ancestors that when you see that they saw things in a complete realm, they didn't see just a portion of it. And that makes a big difference in having a sense of a certainty. One of the most impressive things that I never get over when I look at Egyptian art is how enigmatic it looks. They look so content. They look so peaceful. They look so knowing. And you just wonder, how did a society produce these kind of people? We don't have people who look like that. We don't have the culture that builds that kind of confidence in the self, that confidence in their place, that confidence in their footing. And you know, when you look at Egyptian art, especially if you look at couples, look again closely where the woman's hand is and where the man's hands are. The man's hands are always by his side. It's the woman's hand who embraces him as a way of saying, yes, he's ready to meet the temple. He's ready to be honored. It is she who passes the judgment. And the man who has, and it shows that who she's authorizing, who she's giving a second to, is quite impressive. So when I first went to Egypt in 1973, it was by accident. It was in September. But I went to in May that year, I went to Ethiopia on purpose, because I had come out of the Tuskegee experience where we had elected the first Black elected official countywide, Sheriff Anderson. And you know how white people can be, you know, you people, y'all can't rule yourself, you know, Africa's in a mess, and not to mention that we call us a mess, but they're in a mess. So I wanted to go and see what African heads of state look like. And I found out that there was an organization of African unity called the Organization of African Unity. And each year they will meet in a different country. And that year, 1973, they were meeting in Ethiopia. So I had to take my Black ass to Ethiopia so I could see for myself. And I spent 2 weeks in Ethiopia that changed my life, because I saw a culture that was endemic to the people, that they revolved around this culture, and this culture was ancient, and they belonged to it and vice versa. And I saw the Orthodox Christian culture, and that made me want to see more about their history. And that what brought me the next year, I went back again to see Lalibela, which is an ancient holy city where you have 11 churches dug into the mountain. Instead of bringing construction material to build a place, they went to the mountain and just excavated it and just made a sculpture. I was also, since there, I was photographing the heads of state, and that's why I photographed Haile Selassie, which is in the frontispiece of my book, Feeling the Spirit. So September, I find myself being engaged by TWA to go and make a travel brochure of Egypt. And my God, you know, I didn't know what to expect. I get up one morning and I see miles in the distance from Cairo, this huge mountain, 35 stories high, that just seems to take over the horizon, the pyramids. Wow, one of them were bad enough, and then you had 3 of them. And so I started working in Cairo in the museums, and I got down to Aswan, and I got back to Luxor.
As I'm in the midst of applying for.
And guess what happened? Just as I'm learning, and I'm so overwhelmed by this stuff and not able to put it all together, and I'm looking at these people, and I said, these people look African. Why don't we know about these people? These people don't look like they're mean, bad, like the Bible said. They look look like very religious people, very spiritual people. So in the middle, just as I was finishing up looking at the temple of the Father, which in the Egyptian religion, the Father is Amen, A-M-E-N. And you probably go to church and you probably hear people say that. You probably go to mosque and you hear people say that. You probably go to synagogue and you hear people say that. That is the one word that is not translated. That is the one word that when everybody says it, they know, wow, that's it. That's the ultimate power. But nobody knows that that word is the only God of the Egyptians. The Egyptians didn't have many gods. When people talk that shit, that's bullshit. They had one God. And to them, the God, amen, existed behind the sun. So that's why they are praying to the sun. So the people, the Europeans who are incapable of understanding sublime messages would tell you that they are sun worshipers. Well, yes, they are looking at the sun. Yes, they are praying to the 4 stations of the sun: sunrise, sunset, the quarter in between, and then up high. So the 5 stations of the sun, they're praying to every day. But in their mind, they have left the records to say it, which we couldn't read until about 150 years ago. They felt that the sun was merely the window upon the resonance of God. It's the window to amen. Amen is what happens when Nut, in the act of giving birth to the son, it's like the placenta. The amen comes out first, and then the sun comes out. But the amen is what allows the sun to tear away the darkness. And when the Europeans talk about the Egyptians worship many gods and they're pagan and all that stuff, what the Egyptians were really doing is they were trying to make sure that even non-literate people could approach the many different aspects of amen. That yes, amen controlled the light. If we did not have the light, the sun is the strongest force in the universe. They believed in nature. If the sun went out for 2 weeks, forget it, boys and girls. The planet would freeze. We will all be dead. So, but that sun also causes heat, and it causes the water to heat up and give us atmosphere. That sun also tells every plant which way is up when they begin to grow. That morning sun tells every animal to open its eyes. That sun is in control because it gives us atmosphere, it gives us wind. It heats the planet, it heats the rock. It makes everything work. Look at the tornadoes, the circular air. It makes everything work. So yes, the sun, if there's one thing you need to pray to, you need to pray to Uno. Uno is amen behind the sun. But the different gods that they get confused about is what we will call the Netarus. All of the aspects of nature, whether those aspects have to deal with natural science, natural environment, physical environment, human environment, animal environment, all of the aspects of nature, you can look at it, you can say, well, amen, you cover everything, but I want specifically to deal with this right here because I'm missing love in my life. Oh, I'm having a bad thing with health. I'm having this issue, that issue. So the Egyptian says, okay, we will give you specific aspects, Netaru aspects of Amen, so that you can go after you pray to Amen. Overall, you can go and then try to qualify it with a particular thing. The Catholic Church people do the same thing. They have all these saints. What do you think these saints are? Nothing but the Netarus. You don't call them, worshiping multiple gods for it. Same principle. In fact, there is no principle. There is no theological principle that the human mind can think of that the Egyptians have already acted on. In fact, everything every piece of terminology we have come from the Egyptians. Now, I discovered by studying Egyptology that there are 3 tombs in Egypt where on the tomb walls, there are hundreds of lines of Holy Scripture. And the one tomb wall that has not been damaged, is a tomb wall of a king named Unas. Write that down because I want you to Google that. This is too important for you to take it from me. U-N-A-S, Unas. Now, Unas was a king, and the right way of saying these, I will say in the future, when I talk about Egypt in my next book, I won't refer to Egyptians as kings. In this book, you found I did not refer to them as pharaohs because there's no such word in the Egyptian language. but they were not kings. They were holy fathers and holy mothers. That was their role, and that's what they did. And you see that role whenever you look at their art with them and in audience with Amen or the different Neterus. They are in these audiences with the supreme creator or his divine assistance, try on behalf of their people. That's why when a new pharaoh or king or holy mother or father comes, it is not legitimate until you see these images of them bowing down or kneeling down in front of Amen, and Amen acknowledging them. Amen acknowledging this person who is your leader. And when Amen then reaches out above your head to salute you, that is Amen choosing you. That's where the chosen one comes from. Amen chose this one and what this one represents and who this represents. So by extension, when Amen chooses a king or a queen, he's also choosing the people that go and stand behind that king and queen. So you will see always these figurines, these paintings, or these engravings of the king with Amen. That's why people were praying for the king, because they wanted the king to be safe, to have a good mind, and to be able to argue their case. So it's an incredible kind of relationship. People line up behind the one that they choose to lead them. And the one that they choose to lead them have a heavy responsibility. It is their job to maintain contact with the ultimate creative source so that they can do things that can help out the population. Well, you know, by accident, a few of these things escaped and got into the Bible. You probably remember the story of, and they brought one in with Joseph. It gives you an idea of the power of these people who were the Holy Fathers. So the Holy Fathers had a habit. Every morning they woke up, whatever dreams they had them written down. They believed that dreams were like a advanced radar system, that the spirit was telling them, that Amen was telling them, was talking to them, and giving them advance warning, advance notice of what was coming. So if you remember the story, this particular king had a dream of 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows. And after the dream was written down, there are people who are supposed to interpret those dreams if the king has a problem. And all the interpreters, just like him, was dumbfounded. Now, here comes the foreigner, the refugee, who is in prison, who had been able to tell the cook, hey, cook, you're going to die. When you go up before the Pharaoh, this is what's going to happen. You're going to die. So I don't remember what happened to the cook, but the cook let it be known that his dream in prison was this, and this particular foreigner interpreted. So the king said, bring this one here. Now, here's a problem. This is a dream we can't solve. What does it say to you? And then he interprets it as being those 7 years of famine, of plenty, 7 years of famine. And then this king, realizing this as a message that is reliable to him because it came to him in his mind, then he set about to say, okay, you're in charge. We need to build granaries all over the country. 7 years, we need to fill it up, because the next 7 years, if we don't prepare, we're going to have unrest. If there's unrest, I'm going to lose my job, because the people are going to say, look, God didn't tell you this was going to happen. What kind of leader are you? But what an amazing story, because it points to the fact that these people who were the leaders had access to a universal thinking that saw things in the round. And with that access, they had the will. People gave them the will to act on what was a dream. But in that dream was a message. So, after then, we get the Bible give us some more dreams, it gets weird. Remember how Abraham gets this dream, this weird ass dream? Go and sacrifice. What I said? Don't worry, just go sacrifice. I mean, there's a difference between hearing voices in your head and having divine dreams. And what we get from the patriarchs are always voices in their head, madness. And then the guy is, and what kind of person will go out and want to kill their own child off because they heard voices in their head? This is just one of the problems with the Abrahamics. But the Abrahamics did all this because of them. They came from a different group who hated the indigenous Egyptians. People are just now beginning to talk about it. But, Egypt was a great country for thousands of years, 7,000 years running. But every now and then they had what they call these collapse. The Egyptologists call them intermediate periods. The Ethiopians call them fascinats, or the fight between the princes. There's always going to be an ego that says, well, I should control this and you shouldn't be over me, because if you're not over me, I'm going to make more money here and I'm going to have more power. And in fact, they went to war. The war in Egypt was always over two things: secession or theological. And and both of those could hide egos. So you had these three collapsing periods in the Egyptian timeline. But after each collapsing period, the Egyptians came back and built stronger. Their culture allowed them to recover. Now, there's a group of people who came into Egypt as peacemakers, who were hired mercenaries because there was princes warring in the Delta. So they brought these Hyksos people who were essentially Syrians and to be mercenaries. And these Assyrians were able then to put down all the fighting, and they realized that they could take over the country because they brought something with them that the Egyptians didn't have in terms of a fighting tool. The Egyptians up until that time believed in fighting man to man on an open plain, on foot, and with bow and arrows. The Assyrians came in with the horse, faster horse than the ones that come out of Ethiopia. And they came in with a chariot that they would use to ram the front line of the Egyptians. So if you look up and you see this big chariot and horses running after you, they would just run through the line and just run over people, kill people. And the Egyptians, being on foot, couldn't compete with that. And they defeated the Egyptians. One by one, starting in the north, in the Delta, and eventually ending up in Luxor or Waset. It took a generation for the Egyptians to go into exile into Abydos in Nubia to recover from that. It took a generation for the military and the Holy Family to recover. And they left behind all of these people, deserted all these people, because they were on the verge of being killed themselves. But in that generation, those 20 years, they came up with another idea. They said, because the thing is, how do you defeat people who have just defeated us with this ramming tool that they have? So the Egyptians had to settle for those horses out of Ethiopia, which are smaller but fast. And that's when they developed the chariot. They didn't make another a ramming chariot. They made artillery chariots. So the chariots they made were light. They had 5 spokes for maneuverability and 2 horses. One person was the driver, the second person was the archer. And they developed this military strategy where they will run up to the front line of the Hyksos in shooting distance, but far back so that the rammers couldn't get them. And they were all hundreds of chariots coming at a time. As they're coming in, they're firing their arrows. Just when the chariots begin to come at them, they didn't turn around the chariot, and the archer turns around and they keep firing arrows, and they just keep assaulting. Then finally they drove the Assyrians, the Hyksos, out of the country. They finally had this peace treaty between Ahmoses. You may have heard that name Moses before. Ahmoses is a very common name in Egypt. It means to be born, to become. And Ahmoses made a treaty with them. He said, okay, your people have been here 200 years. You've stolen everything because that's what you're into. I'll give you a peace treaty. Come out of the citadel of avarice, because you're afraid to fight me and I can't breach the walls. And I'll give you safe passage out of my country. But if I ever see you again here, I will come and I will defeat you again. So that's what happened. His army formed a corridor, and 200,000 people left with all their theft. That's where the Old Testament begins. The Old Testament begins with this 40 years in the jungle or the desert, because they're trying to make it back to where they came from. But the geopolitical situation has changed. Can you imagine? Here's a kingdom, small little state, and you just see 250,000 people coming your way. Should I be safe? Should I feel that I'm safe, or should I worry? Well, different people reacted different ways. So it was not uncommon for them to run in situations where people say, no, this is war. This is an invasion. And that's what the Old Testament is talking about. All of these wars that they had to fighting, trying to get back out of the Sinai, get back into Syria. And finally, they had to give up that fight and then go and take over the city-state colonies of Canaan, which were fragmented because they were city-states. But that's where they were able to make their landing. And then, now I have to say that from what this is my thinking as I think about it, and I don't want you to, and I take ownership of it. But if you imagine that these foreigners have run this country for 200 years, maybe 250 years, all the local Egyptians have grown up under them, and they have been acclimated to feel that these are the rightful rulers. Not everybody, but some people. So when the Hyksos, and there's records for this, when the Hyksos left, the first part of this, there's records. The second part, there's not, and I'll tell you the difference. The first part is that when they left Avarice, the citadel of Avarice, which was a mile or so long, the chief priest of the temple of On, which is what, when light comes on, it's on, the temple of On, wrote to the king, Ahmoses, and say, look, let us go and purify this place. Ahmoses says, good, try it. Once they get there and do their purification, a note is dispatched to Apapus, who's the last Hyksos king in Egypt that was driven out, who's now fighting for his life in Canaan, trying to get back to Syria. They dispatch a message to Apapus saying, Apapus, in their naivete, Apapus, come back. We have avarice. You can come back and take it. Apapus says, no, I don't want it. I know I know I would be defeated. Your king will defeat me. But instead, you love me so much, you come to me. And that's what he did. Now, this is the other part of the story that you don't get. That is part of my working through this, because this whole work is really about how to unravel all of these loose pieces. I mean, I look at what I've done in Sacred Nile as in the beginning is coming upon a trash heap. And there are pearls all around, but they're not on a string. And I have to find out what each pearl means and then how to restring it. So in that unraveling, you have Sacred Nile. But this part is part of my thinking unraveling is that what happened next is this. All the Egyptian priests were very good at writing theological stories. And my theory is that the Moses, priest named Moses, when he got to the Hyksos, he says, look, or they agreed together, let's rebrand ourselves. Let's make ourselves the victim rather than the invaders, rather than the occupiers. And we can bring a story and make it work. And that's what they did. They victimized themselves and then demonized the very people who they had been oppressing all of that time. And that's how we get the 5 books of Moses. And they plagiarize Egyptian stories, Egyptian paradigms. They plagiarize the 10 Commandments, which come from the Egyptian 42 Commandments of the Declarations of Innocence. They plagiarize the fight between the 2 brothers. They plagiarize the papyrus boat with Moses, which comes out of the story of Asar, and Heru. They plagiarized, the red menorah on the doorpost, which the Egyptians also did, because that's a part of after you did an animal sacrifice. So unless you know these things, unless you've studied these things, there's no reason for you to see that any of this is amiss. And that was my challenge, is trying to figure out how is it that these things that are left on the walls and are left in the tombs say a completely different story. The narrative is completely different. So how is it that the world before Genesis had this narrative that does not at all reflect the narrative of the Old Testament? But as I come to study it more, it may not reflect directly, but I've learned how it reflects obliquely and how it has plagiarized. And not only how it plagiarized the Egyptians, but it turned around and demonized the very people they plagiarized. So, and then they declared war on the woman. They stripped her of all her divinity. She becomes a problem. She cannot give birth to humanity. It's the man. I mean, all of this insanity that they ask you to have a flight of reasoning and replace that flight of reasoning with faith. And it's worked because we didn't know where that came from or how that connected to something else. So this book has been a discovery for me. The process, the journey has been a discovery. And I have just tried to share that discovery, but I've tried to do something else, because it's easy for an academic or historian to tell you what I've just told you. But what is more important is to show you the evidence. The evidence is there, to show you where the evidence is, and to put it in such a way and give it the glorious treatment that it deserves, so that you can point to the evidence and you can reach and you can understand and absorb what you see. And if you go there, you can take this book as a guide and go find those places. And that's what I hope people do. A friend of mine just made that trip. She just left. She went first to Ethiopia with the book. Now she's in Sudan, and she'll be going to Egypt next week with the book.
Wow.
She's going to find these places as in the book. So
can we pause here? Brother Higgins? What a fascinating rendition. And for many of us, you are just reaffirming what we study at Wose Community, and we love the relating that you're giving to us. I wrote down some questions that I'd like to ask you, and just, you were inspired by this person. Who is C.H. Pope?
PH.
Oh, it's P.H. Pope.
PH.
PH.
Yeah, Pope, I must say that there's 2 really incredible or influential points in my life. One, growing up and having this vision at 9, and then my great aunts and uncles who were great guides for me, and then P.H. Polk at Tuskegee. P.H. Polk was a photographer when Tuskegee had a photography school during the time of Booker T. Washington. Booker T. had hired these 3 photographers to make pictures of him because he, like Frederick Douglass, understood the power of the camera. And he would use these pictures to help raise money for the school and to project an image that was credible for people to give money. When that, years after Booker T died, that department was eliminated. Polk was one of the teachers. And then Polk became like a contract photographer for the university. Whenever they needed pictures, he was a guy that the university administration would go to. And then when the student newspaper and student annual needed pictures, we would go to Mr. Polk as well. So at the time, I was a business manager for the student newspaper. And we had the administration gives you a budget. It was a budget for an 8-page paper. So we could put out a paper. But we had an editor that year who was quite ambitious, who wanted to do 12 pages. And the administration said, we're not giving you the money. So it fell upon me, the business manager, to figure out how to get the additional money to pay for these other 4 pages. So I thought, well, we make the biggest money ads are that we get are display ads, national ads. And the local ads are usually just a reproduction of their business card. So I came up with the idea, what if we can sell display ads to the local businesses so that they can have a picture of the proprietor or of the business in their newspaper, which meant that the ad would have to be bigger, which meant they would have to pay more, which meant that's how we will make the extra money we need to do the extra 4 pages. So I sold these business people on this idea. They were for it, they paid. And the day we had to go to press, we had no pictures. So I had to go to Mr. Polk's house and I said, look, we're on press, we need pictures right now. But he said, well, look, I learned later that this is Mr. Polk's MO. So many people he made pictures for, they never saw the pictures, but I went and I insisted on my pictures. And he said, look, I made the pictures, I shot them, but I haven't processed them. So I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, I have to take them in a dark room and put chemicals on it. I said, okay, well, I'll wait because I got to have these pictures. So he processed them. And he had a studio on the ground floor of his house, and he had his dark room in the upstairs. And there was a door behind a cloak that he had to go in and out of to reach the stairs to go upstairs. And I would see him disappear back and forth. And then he was ready for me to come look at the negatives that he had just processed. And I go up and I take a look, and I don't know what I'm looking at, but he picks something. And then I go back down and he comes out again. And I notice behind the cloak on the wall are some old pictures of old farmers. Very dignified images that hadn't seen. I'd seen, yes, the professional dignified images he was making of his contemporaries, but people who were farmers really stuck to me because I'm from a farming town. And those people also look like my great uncles and aunt, of they had that great sense of dignity about themselves. So when he finished making the prints, I said, Mr. Polk, I got to take these, but I'm going to come back to you. I want to talk to you about those pictures you have on your wall. So I take the pictures, my assignment to take the pictures to the printer in Auburn, I do that. And once I finished that obligation, I came back and I sat down and talked to Mr. Polk. And I said, well, tell me about these pictures. Well, he said, well, these pictures were made during the Depression. And at his house was on a street, I think it was Washington Avenue. And he said during the weekends on Saturday, farmers will walk into town. They didn't have the money to have a car. They will walk into town for the market. And every now and then, he would keep an eye open looking out his front windows, because every now and then he says he will see what he considered a real character. And he will run out and he will offer them money to come back and sit to let him make a picture of them, because he was using this big camera. It was in a studio. They had to sit for the light. It took a little time. But he said he would offer them money. He said he offered them $5, which people would hesitate, but they knew $5 meant that they could buy some more stuff in the market that they didn't have money for. So that's how he got these pictures. And I said, well, you know, there's some people, my relatives, I want to make that I like to have pictures of, but I know I cannot afford you to go down and make pictures. How do I know that? Because I'm the business manager. I had to pay him to make the pictures he made. So I said, look, would you teach me how to use a camera, how to be a photographer? So, and I said, well, and can I use your camera one day when you're not, you know, working, to learn what I'm doing? So he looks at me, we're sitting on he looks at me very curiously. He's sizing me up. He says, let me understand something. He says, you want me to loan you the only camera that I have to make a living with so that you can learn how to be a photographer? Well, I thought he was questioning my sincerity. I said, well, yes, sir, Mr. Polk, that's right. So he stares back at me a little while longer, doesn't say anything. And finally he says, you know what? If you are fool enough to ask me this, I'm going to be fool enough to help you. I didn't know I was a fool. I didn't realize what that meant for years later, you know?
Let me ask you, could you please describe the signature of the spirit?
Yeah. Well, that comes from my time when I was a 9-year-old kid. And I understood, and it taught me there was a parallel reality. I was sleeping one night, and about maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I hear this sound in my voice, in my head, not in the air. And it was like a static, you know, frequency sound. And I open my eyes, and the room is lit. On one side of the room is lit. And I open my eyes and I sit up because there's a big light, a light in the round that is covering a wall. And in the middle of that light is a Black man in ancient clothing, just, you know, cloth. And he's like holding his hand, and he's like in a meditative sort of position. And I'm like, wow, I'm a kid. I'm 9. I don't know what this means. I don't know if happens to everybody, you know. So I don't know what's going on, you know. This may be what reality is, you know. But it was nothing ominous about it. So I'm looking, and then finally the man opens his eyes and he starts to move towards me, and it still wasn't ominous. Felt a little crackling, but it wasn't ominous. But then I heard in my head the man said, "I come for you." And at that point, I freak out. I mean, I knew nothing. I knew very little about church except Sunday school. But, you know, whatever I knew told me that maybe this was the angel of death coming after me. And that was really freaking me out because it was so fucking unfair. I'm only 9 years old. I just got here. You know, I just got here, motherfucker. What's this shit about? You know, you coming for me. You know, so at that point I screamed. My mother, father, and my grandparents who were staying with us at the time, because my grandfather's house had been burned down by the Klan because he had been paying Black people's poll tax. Everybody rushed into the room. There's a light hanging from the ceiling and a pull chain, and somebody pulls the light, and this man in the light disappears in the wall. And I'm screaming and uncontrollably, and my mother's kneeling down in front of me, holding my hands and rubbing them. And I had this strange sensation of levitating, of looking that they were getting smaller and I was rising above them. I guess that's what people feel like, I don't know, when they're dying, but I feel like that separation. I was arising from them. But my mother kept rubbing my hands very strongly and very warmly and very lovingly, and it brought me back. And then when it seems like there was a lull in my screaming, she just asked me what happened. And I told them what I told you.
Wow.
And everybody was confounded, except my grandfather, who was a minister. And he says, this is a vision. This is a vision from the Spirit calling you to be a minister. Well, you know, I'm a 9-year-old kid. That's pretty intense. I mean, you know, I like chasing girls. What is this? Ministry thing? It seems like it's a straitjacket of some sort. But the next morning he put a Bible in my hand on his way to work. And I took to the scripture like fish to water. And I just began to immerse myself in that ancient world and in those words of wisdom and words of experience and words of memory. And I continued to be a minister until I left for college. And when I went to college, I had all these suits of being a minister, but I told no one that I was a minister because I wanted to live a normal life. Being a minister, as a young minister, being a minister, period, people treated you like an adult. And adults look to you as a portal of spiritual wisdom, which was fine, except that I could not be a kid. I could not be a teenager. I was always an adult from that time on. So at college, I wanted to step out of that. I wanted to experience, I mean, it didn't mean that I started cursing or drinking or smoking. No, none of those things.
That came later.
No. No, I probably only have a few choice words, but I'm not a person with a small person vocabulary. Every sentence has to have all that stuff. But so that I don't think anybody knew. It's not that I didn't tell anybody. The only time I think people knew is that when I wrote about it in my memoir.
Now what is the title of that memoir so that we can?
It's called Echo of the Spirit.
I've seen that.
So the thing about that moment of levitation taught me that there was another reality that I didn't have to be afraid of, but it's a parallel reality and it's there. And my glimpsing that taught me that there was more than what is obvious. And that what is obvious has a certain level of illusion to it. And what is not things that we don't think about is there. So it didn't make me do a Halloween kind of scary ghosty thing. It allowed me to appreciate it in a fullness of reality. So when I say signature of the Spirit, I'm looking at essentially, I guess the best way of describing it is that if there's a hand that you see, I also know there's something else behind the hand.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I'm looking for the signature of what's behind the hand because reality exists at the pleasure of the Spirit. That's what I learned. Everything that we live in a spirit world. It's all, the Spirit is in charge of the spirit world. Yes. And it gives us all of these illusions. And it gives us illusions that are inside of our mind and the outside of our mind. And if we have the ability to accept all that, embrace all of that, then to me, that adds to the layers of what's in the image. So if you are a spiritual person, you see more than what is obvious in the pictures. Or if you're a person who's not scared of other stuff, or you are more embracive of the possibility of the spirits around you, then, but you don't have to be. But because you are not, it's the thing in my pictures that grab you. It's the thing that, it's like that look about the Egyptian monuments that grab you, because it's not what you see that grabs you, it's what you feel that grabs you. But what you're feeling is also a function of what you're seeing without you knowing how it goes together. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. It does. And we're at the 6 o'clock hour, and I'm sure other people want to get in and ask questions.
And I want to say one thing. Everybody, please go to my website, sacrednile.com.
Wait, hold on. Let me, let's go there now. Let's,
Sacrednile.com.
yes, indeed. Let's go to Sacred Nile. Sacrednile.com, and look at these, look at these pictures, everyone. This is truly a magnificent book, taken by a master photographer who is in tune with the spirit. Look at that, the Rock Church of Ethiopia.
Yep.
Wow.
Wow. So now let's have some questions, and then I'll share my screen and we'll do some images of the book.
Okay, that sounds like a winner. The first one is the Kariheb Shango waving his hand, long may it wave. All right, come in and let's have your question.
Okay. Brother, you've been very informative, and I want to thank you because you highlighted some information for me. There is a professor in our community known as Manu, and he took us to Ethiopia, and we went to Lalibela, and we did also go into the various churches that they had there. And the thing that I learned while there, you better have heavy socks on, because those rocks will cut your feet all up if you don't have heavy socks on. Okay, that's part one. The other part one is that currently in San Francisco at the De Young Museum, there is this Ramses exhibit. And you answered something for me, because there's a sarcophagus there. And I noticed that there was an image underneath the sarcophagus. And I said, well, my goodness, that's new. And I never knew before about that. And then you reinforces the significance of why it is there. And so once again, thank you for enlightening me on that. And my last question would be, do you speak any of the ancient languages like Aramaic or ancient Greek, or do you speak or at least read Metaneter? So that's my question to you.
Well, I speak Amharic when I'm there. The Metaneter, I wouldn't say that that I'm very good at it. I try it, and if you see in the book, when you get the book, because to give honor to our ancestors who are hidden behind all these Greek names, I give you a 2-page description in the Metaneter of what you're looking at and how it got corrupted, so everybody can get that first dose of this language. Right. And where is?
Yeah, I've already ordered the book, so I'm waiting for it to show up.
Page 12 and page 13.
Okay, 12 and 13. Okay.
So for those of you who we all need to know how they wrote the word Kemet. We need to know the name of the people of Kemet, Kemetiu. We need to know the name of Luxor, Waset, and what it looked like. We need to know the name Amen and what it looked like. Amun-Ra, Anubis, Osiris, Isis, all these Greek terms, Ma'at, which is what the society was predicated on. We need to know how they express themselves. So I take you back through the Greek to the original, so that we all we're on the same page here. Right. But I have a lot of work to do. I've learned enough to know significant names, and I've learned to know spot right away some things like settlements and the horizon and foreign countries. But it's an ongoing effort, and I respect everybody who is on that road, on that path, because the more you learn as you get into their head, and Champollion being able to decipher all this in the 1800s is what who brought their voice back alive. Right. And it's an incredible voice. So I read a lot of transliterations, a lot of translations. And as I try also to work with the originals, I have a couple people who are experts on on the language. So I'm constantly learning. I know enough to know that I don't know, but it's great to be constantly learning.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Sister Judy, go ahead.
Yes, I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I would encourage all of the audience and those who are listening to definitely go on YouTube and just Chester Higgins has so many interviews and just wonderful interviews where he's really expounding on so much. But I just wanted you to share. I was looking at a video last night with an older video, and I wanted you to share quickly, if you will, about how you go about using lighting, the lighting of the sun. You mentioned and talked about the different periods of time with the lighting of the rising sun and the setting sun as one of the methods you use when you were using lighting, natural light.
Light is my activator. I tell people light is my mistress because it is light that gives the drum beat to my ideas and my understanding. I use light sometimes in ways that photographers don't use light. You see in a lot of my pictures, I shoot actually into the light as opposed to having the light, behind me, which I rarely do. But I use light to mold something, to give something form. Just like I must say, the Egyptian artists are the ones that are the ones that I follow. I mean, I love what they've been able to do with three-dimensional figures in their sculptures, two-dimensional things. They made the first photographs, so to speak, the first paintings. So their artists to me represent a very high bar of excellence, and I try to bring what my approach to the art of photography up to try to match that bar. But yes, I'm in love with light. I'm in love with and one of my mentors, Romy Bearden, who was a painter, taught me the personality of light. I didn't know light until I ran into this director of photography at the Museum of Modern Art, John Sykowski, who was picking some of my pictures for the collection. And he said to me, he said, well, I like these pictures, but what I don't see in your work is a time of day. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, I don't see the light casting a shadow. I don't see the fog. I don't see, I don't see how light is present. And then that same as the spirit is in charge, I came to meet Romy Bearden a few months later, and Romy Bearden started talking to me about the personality of light, and by showing me how the Dutch painters use light and how light can act as a verb in any sort of situation, and how as painters they can put the light wherever they want, but as a photographer you have to find the light and work around with it, and that gets into issues of composition, design and balance, and heading the light off and what have you. But these are, to make a photograph, the way I make a photograph, and I say make because I don't take pictures, I make pictures. I had to learn selectively all of the thousands of different things that a picture could look like. And in order to be able to eliminate, when I'm confronting an image, what I want that image to look like, make those decisions. So it's like you go through thousands of possible decisions to get to the ones you want to then make that work for you. And then the bottom line is that I'm always looking for the spirit of the thing to speak for itself. Because if I can get the spirit of the thing to speak for itself, actually, in a way, that's less work for me, because I don't have to try to work so hard at making it. Of course, I have to work hard enough to be able to acknowledge it. But then at some point, the spirit takes over and continue to make that process work.
Wow. Well, that's excellent. I'm glad that question was asked. I want to switch gears a bit and just say, what was your relationship to the great Gordon Parks?
Gordon was a mentor, very, very fine gentleman, very fine artist, very fine photographer. When I went to see Gordon for the first time, Gordon says to me, he says, well, Chester, what do you want to do? I said, well, Gordon, I don't like how our people are represented in the media. My analysis tells me that there's three things missing when it comes to images of my people. And those three things are the issues of decency, dignity, and virtuous character. He said, well, you're right. He said, so what are you going to do about it? I said, well, I'm going to make those images and I'm going to get them published in the national media. He said, okay. He said, so remember this, when you get an assignment, it's always going to come from a white editor. And if you go out and you do that assignment, and there's a roll of film has 37 frames on it, 36 sometimes plus one. If you make 36 frames the way you just told me, and you make and then you slack up and you make the 37th the way they want to see it, that's the one they're going to use. So if you don't want them to use that picture, don't make it.
Well, okay, that leads me to this next question. What is your opinion of digital photography?
Well, you know, I have to say, as Polk taught me, one day I'm learning photography. I bought my own camera, and I'm looking at photography magazines. Every photographer does that. That's a craft stage. Dentists are prone to this. And I saw in a photography magazine a picture that I like. And I read the caption and it said, well, this picture was made with this lens, this millimeter, and this f-stop, and this shutter speed with this camera. So the picture that I liked had a use of very long lens. So I saved up my money, and I made money by making pictures of professors because they had egos, and I would go show them the contact sheet and they would order prints from me, and from that I could pay for my expenses and save money. But I made the mistake of going by Mr. Polk's house on my way to Auburn to the camera store. And because I wanted Mr. Polk, I said, Mr. Polk, look at this picture. I showed it to him. I said, this is what they use to make it. I'm going to go buy it. And Mr. Polk says to me, he says, stop right there. I said, what? What are you talking about, dude? Stop right there. He says, keep working with what you got, because there's no camera and there's no lens that can make a picture. The only thing that can make a picture is your eye, because you are in control of the camera, not the other way around. So I don't care what people use. There was an experiment when doing the early days of Life where they said, look, let's give 5 non-photographers very expensive camera equipment and send them out for an hour to make pictures. And then let's give very, very good photographers a paper camera. You know, these little paper cameras that just come out, and send them out for an hour. And let's see what it looks like. And you can you imagine what it looked like? The people who had the expensive cameras, their images were shit. The people who had the paper cameras, who had a trained eye, had great images. So it does not matter what you use, as long as you don't forget who's in charge and learn how to make it work for you. Now,
well, let me ask, do you have a favorite like model of camera, like Nikon or, you know, Olympia or Pentax, whatever?
Sort of. I mean, in the early days, I loved Nikons because they came with a light meter. I needed a light meter. Mr. Polk could read light just walking in a room. I couldn't. I needed a light meter. And then I decided, hey, I need the real sharpness of a Leica lens. And that worked until my eyes got bad. And then luckily, autofocus lens came on the scene. And the fastest autofocus lens was made by Canon. So it was an issue of practicality of what worked for me. But that's not the issue that's not the issue to be concerned about with digital cameras. It's not the lens, it's not the body, the weight, all those things you have to feel and see if it works for you. But the issue with a digital camera is the sensor itself. I grew up learning how to shoot black and white film and color film at Look magazine, Kodachrome, where you get such a rich in depthness. So you can, and that's something you go for. That's what we use. That's what the whole issues of depth of field is about. Digital cameras in the beginning, and they still do, but their default is, what their limitation is flatness. There's a flatness. There is a kind of look that you get when you shoot Ektachrome flatness from digital cameras, but it's pretty. And everybody goes, and the pretty is because it's pretty, nobody notices. So for me, a photographer like me, I have to then use light to overcome that limitation. So then that's when I use either layered light or cross light, because then it overpowers the limitation of the sensor to give me what I really want to look at. But that's a very technical issue that most people would never have to think about.
So you mentioned in your talk, you mentioned destiny, dignity, and virtuous character. That's what you
decency.
Decency. I'm sorry, decency.
Decency, dignity, and virtuous character. These are the things that are below the radar of most white people. They just can't imagine that Black people have these, that they have these as an asset of their personality.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I kind of get that. Are there any other questions? We have
so my job at the New York Times was to change that. The Spirit put me at the New York Times.
Wow.
The New York Times is a paper for decision makers, policy makers.
Yes.
I could not do away with any of the narrowness that any other photographer may have about Black people. But I was put in the position of adding to the visual diet. So that in addition to whatever else narrowness they saw my stuff. And gradually that made a difference on their perception. It broadened the approach. The visuals following the eye to work on the heart broadened people's approach. So when I thought that I was successful was, yes, getting big pictures in the paper, but my greatest success was seeing younger white photographers come behind me who were no longer stupid, who saw this larger world, who were able to see and appreciate what I was doing.
Could I add something to also, Chester, as I was looking, I know you, Minister Imhotep, just mentioned the three things that you were trying to show, but what were the two things that you said white people basically always showed us as victims and something else?
Yeah, victims are derelicts or criminals. They love to do poverty porn on us. Poverty porn. They love to do that. You see it now with these and the ads on Africa. Help this child, blah, 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 help these people. Poverty porn, they're comfortable with. And criminals, they're comfortable with. Victimization fits into poverty porn. So they love these extremes, but they can't see the middle.
Yeah.
Can I ask another quick question, Minister Imhotep? I don't want us to not have time for Chester to show the slideshow on the book. So hopefully we have a little extra time. I think he said he would give us some extra time. But I wanted to see if he might share just quickly about his meeting Haile Selassie and Nelson Mandela.
Well, Haile Selassie was a very intriguing figure. He was the kind of person that, first of all, people have to know that Africa is free because of Haile Selassie. And this is how it happened. Kwame Nkrumah and Haile Selassie started the Organization of African Unity. Kwame Nkrumah gave it this whole intellectual paradigm about liberation, nationalism, what have you. Haile Selassie was over the only country in Africa that had never been conquered. They had a tradition of fighting. But because of it, Haile Selassie also did not have an embargo or sanctions against buying weapons. He could buy weapons from the French, he could buy from the Germans, he could buy from the Russians, he could buy from the English, because he had an army to maintain the independence of his country. So what did Haile Selassie do? Keeping in the good graces of the royal families of Europe, he was able to make purchases, more purchases than he needed for his army. Finally, they got a hit to him, but it was too late. And with these extra purchases, he would then send for all of the freedom fighters in every country on the continent, bring them to Ethiopia, have his army train them in munitions, in explosives, in weaponry, and then send them back out fully armed. Haile Selassie is the reason Africa is free. Haile Selassie, because of that, everybody gave him, all the leaders of Africa gave him utmost respect because he had never been colonized and because he helped them free themselves. And he was a man who was very, he taught me something by watching him, how he traveled inside of himself. He was not someone who was expressive. He was someone who was soft-spoken, but what he had to say was echoed. Selassie, as a person, stood in himself, but he felt like he was distant at the same time, standing in an audience of gods. And you can imagine being a week around Haile Selassie. I'm very, taken with all this, and I wanted his attention. And I'm with the press, and we're in corridors when he will come by. And I found out something, because, when you come by, I want to get his attention. And when he gets to you, he doesn't see you. And I found out by studying him why he didn't see you, because he saw you 20 feet away. He was always looking 20 feet in front of himself. So when he got to you, he was looking at the next 20 feet. He had already seen you.
Wow.
He saw you 20 feet before you saw before. He sized up the whole thing before. I thought that was miraculous, a fantastic skill.
Wait,
You know what?
no,
You know what? I'm going to ask you now, because we have about 6 minutes, and yes, we can go over a little bit. If you wouldn't mind sharing your screen and
Okay. Let me open
giving
my
us- yeah.
PDF first. And
while you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen because you were saying some things that echo with us at WOSE, and of course, okay, here is your.
I see you have the glyph for amen.
Yes, I do. I do. Can I get amen? Okay, I'm sorry.
Can you get an amen?
No, I was having a church flash. All right, yeah. So this is the great man with the great work, and I hope you all will get it. It's a very reasonable price, and it'll make a good Kwanzaa gift for this year. All right. And here he was talking about Newt.
Yep.
And I see Katabasi on the line here, and he knows what I'm going to say. There was a man in the Bay Area, came on the radio, Ray Taliaferro, and he would always talk about that great black woman in the sky.
Yeah.
That great, and this is her.
Yeah.
And this is Shu.
And Geb.
And this is Geb. And then he also talked about I'm talking about our speaker, he talked about the importance of the woman and what she does for the man. And this statue is in front of the Cairo Museum, and she's pushing the man.
She's presenting him.
She's presenting him. Yes.
She's presenting him.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Indeed.
she is affirming that he is worthy to be presented.
She is the reason that he is able to sit on the throne.
Right.
And so here's Amen.
Yep.
Just briefly, and here are different representations of Amen.
Yep.
And this is how Minister Makalisi actually just went over this past Sunday at the meditation, and he went over each glyph. This is how you would write Amen, Amun, and it's found in Revelations 3:14. For those of you, is it in the Bible? Is it in the scriptures? Yes. All right. And he mentioned Unas. Another pronunciation is Winnis. And this is how it is written. With the hair and the N. This is the I, and this is the S.
Yes.
Give thanks. Yes, indeed. Also, I should include here WolseyCommunity.org for Oakland, and WolseySac.com for those of you that are new to us. You can go to these websites and find out more about Wolsey Community Church and Wolsey Community. And this coming Sunday, we're having a commemoration of the Ma'afa, the Middle Passage, at Ocean Beach in San Francisco. And so we're going to get there at sunrise. So
fantastic.
Just want to, and this is not a Wolsey event, but we participate in this. This is the San Francisco Bay Area organization, and that's who's putting that on. All right. So I just wanted to share that, and please go ahead, sir, and share your pictures.
So let me say that I want to congratulate you guys as a community that you're doing this work, studying our sacred legacy, and that you're taking ownership of this work, and that you are sharing it with other people. And I hope that my book will become one of your favorite gifts that you give to people. Now, let me see if I can share the screen and do a share here. Okay. The book starts off with these pyramids of Sudan, of Nubian pyramids, which are more, they have a greater number of pyramids than Egypt, but that's a story that's waiting for you in the book. But here is a holy family. So here you have Amen, you have the woman, Mut, and you have the son. A family is a father, a mother, and a son. It's not a father and a son and a Holy Ghost. This is what Egypt looks like along the Nile. This is what Ethiopia looks like along the Nile. This is what King Tut looked like. The stars and the starry sky was very important to the Egyptians. They got so much information out of it. In fact, they believed that when the king ascended, you find in the tomb of Unas, it talks about his ascension. It will go to this star on the left of the belt of Orion Orion. And then this is where one of the Nile starts. This is a tributary. And then it took me decades just to.
Is that the Blue Nile?
Yes, Blue Nile.
Wow.
And it took me decades to realize, why is it that the Nile goes north? And it dawned on me finally one day, one trip I'm making about Ethiopian Air, which I always fly when I go to Ethiopia, to Egypt. I mean, to Africa, all throughout Africa, I fly the Ethiopian Air. And you know how they have these videos in the front of the cabin that shows you where the plane is going? And I began to put it together when I noticed that the plane kept climbing out of Egypt and Sudan into Ethiopia. So after that trip, I came back home and I started looking for topographical maps. And I looked for the Northeastern African topographical map, and I discovered that here is the reason, the Nile Trench, that the water from Ethiopia in Lake Tana it starts descending from 6,000 feet above sea level, all the way down the Nile Trench into Khartoum, Sudan, Nubia, and finally into the Mediterranean. It keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. So I commissioned this map to show a profile of the terrain and the miles and what was going on and what areas were.
Hold on just a second. We have a question from one of our great scholars, Salim, and he's asking. He says, "I'd give anything to know your settings for each picture." Just for
I'm sorry to disappoint you, my brother. Yeah, I'm sorry. So so the Nile is what connects us all. The river Nile was an ancient highway for our ancient people. They just walked down past the river and they migrated. And with that migration, they took what they believed along with them. So here, for people who Egyptologists and whites who have dissonance about Egypt being a part of Africa, I put this map in to show that, in detail to show that Egypt is a part of Africa. Here, on the back of this temple in Nubia is this woman, this huge, very Fukan woman who was a queen. They had more queen rulers in Nubia than they did in Egypt. And they called these rulers, had a name, a female ruler name was Kandaki. Now the English messed that one up too when they talk about Queen of Sheba, Candace, Queen of Sheba. Candace was as close as they could get to Kandaki, but they also wrong about Sheba. So here, the highlands of Ethiopia, morning sunrise at Giza, the Sphinx in Egypt, a Sphinx temple in Sudan, the water coming out of the mountains of Ethiopia on its way down to Egypt. 80% of the water that gets to Egypt comes out of Ethiopia. And right now, Ethiopia is building a huge dam, the biggest dam in Africa, so they can industrialize their country. And guess who wants to sabotage it? Egypt.
Egypt.
So here we have the churches that are dug out of the rock in Lalibela against the night sky. This is 6,000 feet above sea level, and the stars hanging overhead. It looks like you can reach up and touch the floor of heaven. Here's another Kandaki in Nubia in her temple at one of her pyramids. Here are the boats that are made out of papyrus. They're called tanquas, the same kind of boat that the Bible talked about Moses being put into. And here you have worship 5,000 years ago from a tomb in Egypt. And you have now, you have a priest, a female priest in Egypt offering either water, honey, or milk in offerings. Here, the offering is incense. Here, incense as well. Water, baptismal. This is a water offering here. And then you have a Nefertari offering, making an offering to Hathor. You have African Americans who go back to Egypt, worshiping the ancient spirits. And look, another image of one of those churches in Ethiopia, dug out of the rock, separated from this rock and this rock in the middle. All of this is from the chisel from the same rock. Temples in Egypt with the Black Pharaoh, temples in Nubia. This is what the inside of those rock churches look like in Ethiopia, chiseled out of the very rock. They're just sculptures. Pyramids, these things here about maybe 10 or 12 stories high, statues of a king in front of the temple. This is what the end temple service look like. When Nut releases the sun, when Amen tears away the night, that is a sign of continuity. That is a sign of happiness. That is what they've been worshiping and praying for. Now they can go to the fields and do their work. A pilgrim in Ethiopia, in the temples, let me rush through this. I'm just going to rush, give you guys, I'm not going to talk because I want to get to where the 10 Commandments come from.
Uh-oh.
Yep. Look at this angel. Let's see this Ethiopian angel. Isn't that virtuous?
Yes.
My God. Look at this is judgment scene. When you die, before you go, wherever you're going to go, judgment scene. Look at the early angels of Nubia with the wings. The angels, this is their Sistine Chapel in this church in Gondar, Ethiopia. The oldest Bible in Ethiopia, the oldest one from the 6th century. Look what's on the frontispiece, the sun. Akhenaten. This is King Tut's tomb, burial chamber. The return of the sun fire that happens once a year. Now, this is Mary and this is Jesus. They 5,000 years before this image, the paradigm was here. We call Heru or Osiris and Isis and Horus. This is where it all came from. So look at that solar sun. You gotta, so the Christians worked it, but they didn't tell you where they got it from. They didn't tell you it wasn't their story. The obelisk, here's the church of Saint George. This is the place where the Ethiopians say that the Ark of the Covenant given to Moses resides in this treasury building in the holy town of Aksum. The desert. This is the mummy of Ramses the Great, and this is his mortuary temple on the right. This is the obelisk of the Ethiopians worshiping the sun as it breaks the horizon in the highlands. This is that break. This is his tomb where the 10 Commandments come out of. This is the tomb of Unas. Remember, she was showing you earlier, Unas. Here's with the leaf, the S, the animal. This is Unas right there. And where over here, do we have Unas? No, you see, but you see it here several times. It breaks up. But in this room are 331 lines of Holy Scripture, the earliest Holy Scripture that has been recorded in the world. Now, history, the line between history is what was oral and what's been written down. This is history. Somebody can say there's an older, you can say anything, but we have the evidence and we have the record to which king it was, and we have the record since the Egyptians were obsessed with record keeping. We know exactly which period and when this person lived. This is a tomb of Unas. It is there now. When you go to Egypt, please go. This is ground zero for holiness. This is what our people left behind. Our people knew we would forget. That's why they left it behind in stone. They left it behind in every medium they could think of, in paper, in plaster, in paintings, in sculpture. They left it behind in stone. Here is the largest tomb in the Valley of the Kings, the tomb of Seti. And these tombs, you have to remember, we may see it because we're coming to it, but the Egyptians saw these as the mansions of eternity, the apartment of eternity. And the priests saw it as a way to use spiritual technology for this vessel in time to travel. So all of this stuff that they talk about, well, they have derivative words they talk about it, but it's formulas, spiritual formulas. Now these spiritual formulas are pretty good because we've only discovered out of maybe 200 kings, we've only discovered about 50 tombs. The other ones are unknown. We don't know where they're at. And just to think, King Tut, who was found 100 years ago, November 22nd, by English tomb robbers, he had been undisturbed and protected for 3,600 years. So our people understood something about time. They understood something about spirit. And these spiritual tombs were done in such a way that we don't understand it, but they were done in such a way to protect the inhabitant throughout time. And they have worked pretty good. Here are tombs of a Kandaki, a woman queen in Nubia. I had to go back 3 different years to this tomb in order to get it right with the lighting, because it's such a beautiful tomb, but there's no lighting in it. People go in there when they take you in there, they take you in with a flashlight. So you can see individual parts of it, but it doesn't give you a sense of the majesty of it. So it took me 3 years and on the third lighting situation, I had enough light because it just soaks up light. I had enough light that at the same time where the light would not damage the paint, because the paint is a plant-based paint. You don't want to fry it. To be able to show the different compartments of the tomb, and to show you on the right side, you see the figure in the front is taking her by the hand and leading her into the afterlife. The Egyptians saw the temple as that life exists in a trinity. So yes, Holy Family is a trinity, but life itself exists in a trinity. You have the sky above us, we have the land underneath us, and we have the spirit world underneath that. That is the trinity that is always with us. And those are the trinities that they were always aware of. Here is the tomb of Amun in Hatshepsut's temple. Here is the tomb to the woman, Hathor, in Ethiopia. I mean, not the tomb, the temple. And here's looking at, in a passageway of one pyramid looking out to another one. Here's a Muslim funeral. This is a poster board, King Tut, that everybody talks about. And if there's any exhibitions on King Tut, please go see them. This is one of his stepsisters. These are what they call canopic jaws, where your intestines will be separated from your body so they won't rot inside the body. Here's the tomb of Ramses the Great, son who succeeded him, Merenptah. This is a ritual cemetery of nothing but women priests. So like in Egypt, you have a separate cemetery for the women queens, and you have a separate cemetery for the men. This is a temple inside of a mountain in Sudan. These are tombs in Ethiopia. Pyramids in Sudan, Nubia. Ramses the Great.
Ramesseum, yeah.
Ramesseum.
Yeah.
And then here is interesting, these tombstones by the Oromo people who believe in nature. And these people understood that we have a sky. They were putting a symbol to where we're located. We're in a system, a solar system, where we have a sky with two eyes. One eye is the sun and one eye is the moon. Some solar systems have 3 and 4 eyes. We have those too. A temple to the woman in Philae, and then this is the sarcophagus of Haile Selassie and his wife.
This one for the Philae one, when you're in there and you see where the Christians later came in and carved their cross on, yeah.
Yep. Christians had real problems. They also carved off, the penises of the gods and what have you. Then here again, the Milky Way is very important. The sky is very important to the Egyptians. So the first Milky Way I did at 7,400 feet above sea level. I had to learn mountain climbing. I had to learn astronomy. And I had to, so those 16 years I was studying, I was doing yoga to help me with my balance because the terrain is rocky, number one. And then climbing was a whole nother issue. But that's what I had to do to get these pictures, and that's what I did. And here you have King Tut in his golden coffin of eternity. In fact, there were 3 golden coffins, one inside each other, and you have the wings of the bird, of the angel, taking him up to heaven. And I have reading material for you based on each chapter. Here is a picture in stone showing Amen choosing Hatshepsut. Choosing the leader. I choose you, the chosen one. That didn't come from that's there again. Moses rebranded the Hyksos, took Egyptian stories, reformed them, reformulated them. And the libationer, because the libationer is usually in the beginning of every ceremony, you make a libation to those ancestors who preceded you. And here at 6,000 feet above sea level is the Blue Nile Falls heading down to Egypt. So that's it, people. And I hope every one of you see fit to add this book to your collection and see fit to give it to other people who you think might appreciate this knowledge, and spread the word. Just a couple of weeks ago, the African American Institute had a gala for their membership, who paid a lot of money to come to this thing, and they gave away 400 books to each person who attended this gala. They each walked away with a copy of Sacred Nile.
Well, we have been blessed tonight. What a wonderful, wonderful experience. Photography, discussion of the spirit, discussion of the istory. He even, for those of my Rasta friends, he even talked about his imperial majesty, Jah Rastafari. Give thanks and praise. What a wonderful thing. Thank you so much.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello? Who's
Hello,
that?
this is Barbara Smith.
Yes.
Chester Higgins, you and I were in freshman class together. I worked on Campus Digest with you and James McJunkins. And I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you.
Okay.
I turned on the TV one Sunday morning, to watch my favorite TV show, CBS Sunday Morning, and the first guest they announced was you. It was January, New Year's. I was so happy to see and know you were doing well. How much is your book?
It's $50, but on Amazon you can get it for $40.
That's wonderful news.
Yeah.
Wonderful news. I came late to this party, and I'm not showing myself because my makeup team went home early tonight.
Oh, dear.
and now I'm not looking that swell. But it has been an absolute pleasure, and an absolute pleasure. Let me share one little story with everyone. When I was a little girl in kindergarten on the campus of Tuskegee, maybe it was second grade, whatever, but all of the dignitaries would come to visit the campus because of its importance. And those dignitaries would be brought down the hill, down the street to our elementary school, and we would have an instantaneous assembly program. And this particular day, we didn't know who was coming. We never do. We just show up with our little selves and sit down and be quiet. But this day, Haile Selassie walked upon our stage.
Wow.
And he had on his royal robes and the scepter and things that he carries in his royal. There was another young man who was in the audience that morning, and he grew up and he had two boys, and one of his boys married Haile Selassie's granddaughter. I have pictures of the wedding in a website that he sent to everybody. It was an absolute regal, but who in the world would ever dream that that little boy sitting in the
You put yourself on mute. Unmute yourself, Barbara. Hello? Oh dear.
Hello?
Yeah, come back. Yeah.
Okay, that was Tom Joyner. That was the little boy. And his son grew up and married Haile Selassie's granddaughter.
What?
Yes, that is so true. I have pictures of the royal wedding. He sent pictures to those of us who were in the fabulous grouping of his classmates and schoolmates. And I treasured that, and I'm happy to share that story. But I was also just thrilled to hear your talkings about Egypt and your out-of-body experience. I've had two of my own, but nothing is fabulous. I wasn't called to do anything. I have no spiritual callings, but I did have a couple of out-of-body experiences, and the way that one can know that it is true, and there is no hot or no cold. You cannot feel hot or cold. It doesn't exist in that realm. So I will just click off. And where are you living now? I'm here in Atlanta.
I live in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, okay. Well, if I ever get up there to see my Aunt Polly, I'll surely look you up.
Oh,
But
good.
Spike Lee is up there. He is my blood cousin.
Oh,
His grandfather and my grandmother were brother and sister on the Lee side.
huh.
And it also contains Malcolm Lee, who did the movie The Best Man Holiday, and Best Man Final Chapter will be released shortly. All of the guys and girls will be coming back in, and they're in that movie. So this is Barbara Smith signing off.
All right. Thank you for sharing, Barbara. Well, tomorrow we're going to be on this very same Zoom channel. We're a study of sacred scriptures. We're just going to read some scriptures and pray. Pray for our community. Pray for our families. Family, community, nation, and race. Tomorrow, prayer. If anyone would like to join us at 6 p.m. Pacific time on this Zoom channel. Thank you very much, Chester Higgins. You are an incredible resource to the African community. Thank you
You
so
are
much.
national treasure.
And thank you for putting together this book.
Thank you, sir.
Wow.
Beautiful book.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Grab
Good
my
night.
seat tomorrow.
Sacred
Thank
love.
you
Yes.
sincerely. Thank
Hopefully
you so
he'll
much.
come back for part 2.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
You.
Hey, good to see you, Nabantu. Hi, Nabantu. How are you? Good to see you.
Oh, it's good to be here. I'm just I don't even have words for what I just heard. But
Wow.
it's astounding and it's awesome. So thank you for having the knowledge. What is it called? Black
Knowledge matters.
Black knowledge definitely matters. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I noticed that it wasn't Nozen Daily that was on, but it was your other daughter that was on Sunday to hear Obutashaka, and I noticed that you were on.
Oh yeah, Damali.
Damali was on. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Uh-huh.
I wanted to thank some of the people who were visitors today that have never come, that was some of my guests. And I hope that we'll be able to consider at some point our planning committee having Chester Higgins back for a part 2.
Oh, well, no question. No question we'll have. And we're glad to have the gentleman, Marshall. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for telling us about it's your great-grandfather, Booker T. Washington, right?
That's right. And Minister Hotep, I want to say that I had an epiphany this evening when the goddesses come bearing gifts. Never turn your back on them. Because as I said earlier, Judy had invited me. I had a planned program of working on my dissertation this evening, but there's nothing that I could have done that I can think about that actually tops this experience. So thank you very much, Judy, and thank you very much, Minister Hotep.
You're quite welcome. It's all part of the service, and good luck on that dissertation.
Thank you.
All right.
He's brilliant. That's his book too. His background. I can't let him go. Let's go. Booker T. Washington and the Black Revolution. What a wonderful book that's written by Marshall Bowie. How can we get that book, Marshall?
Okay, go to the website, ourreality.com. I'll just spell it all together, ourrealitybooks.com, and you can order it from there. But I'll tell you what, anybody that orders it that can tell me that you participated in this show, I will send you a great free copy.
Wow.
So all you have to do is in the contact information, say you saw me on this show advertised in the book, and I will send you a hardback free copy. They normally sell for $25. You get yours for paying $0. I'll take care of the postage and everything. That's how much I appreciate the opportunity to have been on the show tonight.
Oh, wow. So
Give
beautiful.
thanks. Give thanks, brother. Thank you, Marshall.
Yes.
All right. See everyone. Glad you could join us, Keith, Mama Rose, Damani, Bill, Judy. Thanks for recommending Chester Higgins and bringing and coordinating and bringing it all together. Bobby, Mama Emma, I don't know who you are, but glad you could be there. Dr. Lula Bridges,
Yes.
thank you for joining us. And Barbara, thank you for your
Thank you.
work. All right. Bye now. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Live up.
Live
Peace.
up. Live up. Live up.
Great, great show. Great. Thank you.
Night, night.